Hey guys, it's Debbie Potts, and I wanted to share a little bit of my slide presentation I'm working on for a webinar coming up in April. And I'm going to talk about metabolic testing and a little bit more on heart zone training. So let's find the clicker button to move this slide. Okay, so PNOE testing. I've been talking about metabolic testing, big topic out there on social media and podcast and YouTube on VO2 max testing for longevity. I'm a big believer that we need to test and not guess, but also I don't think you should get hung up on what your number is VO2 max. It's more about what are your heart zones that we need to identify where you need to improve on. So we find your limiters, your limitations, your areas of opportunity with testing and not guessing and really personalizing this information together that not everyone needs to spend 80% of their time in zone 2 and 20% of their time doing interval training and doing the VO2 max workouts, doing the 4x4 workout where they're not even really 4 minutes in zone 4 and maybe they're not even doing sprint interval training in zone 5 because they're not getting the right intensity that they need. So wearing a heart rate monitor, not just your watch, but a chest strap is going to be a lot more accurate on figuring out how to pace yourself. But also, if you're doing sprint training, you just go all out hard as you can. But using a heart rate monitor to figure out your zone 1, because zone 2 or zone 5 is hard to figure out where you are because the heart rate monitor doesn't catch up in time because you're going all out 10 to 30 seconds. So we'll talk about personalized training, fueling program, nutrient timing, exercise metabolism, what do we find out in the testing, and more. So I have been around a long time. I will move my little video camera here. So who am I? If you don't know, I've been doing this podcast for 12 years. We started with John Smith doing Fit Fast podcast, and then he left me on my own and had a few co-hosts as my friend Brock Armstrong, and we just kept going until he couldn't help me anymore. And then I started just on my own doing this because I love to do podcasting. So I'm a personal trainer by NASM for years, a metabolic efficiency coach. I did Bob Seelbauer's training, and last couple of years I did PNOE metabolic training with Daniel Crumbach. I've done Ben Greenfield's coaching program, Superhuman Coach originally 12 years ago. Then we had Keon coaching program, and I was part of his team. Nutritional therapy practitioner. I did the Czech Holistic Lifestyle Coach Level 1 training. I did Level 1 USA Triathlon Coach certification. I did a DNA Fit course. And really now focusing on more of a health investigator, taking the knowledge of a nutritional therapy practitioner and FDN practitioner, putting it all together, and then adding on different courses along the way. As Dr. Stacy Sims' course last year, now I'm in the Precision Medicine Fellowship Program for Precision Medicine. Is it epigenetics? Adding that into my health investigation. So collecting clues, data, figure out how to personalize a program for people of all levels, just not athletes, right? We want to be healthy from the fitness approach, training, how we train, but also functional lab testing and looking at what we're doing nutritionally and how is their microbiome and all that stuff. So I love getting into all this. I created the holistic method over 10 years ago because I realized as a personal trainer, I wasn't able to get results with people just training them 2 times a week for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. I realized I want to know how they're sleeping. How is their stress level? How is their gut health? Are they moving throughout the day? How is their hydration? Are they drinking enough water with minerals? And are they making sure they're having time to play, laugh, and be joyful? So that's part of my history. Also, I wrote a book based on my own experience. Why I do what I do now is called Life is Not a Race, It is a Journey, and the Holistic Method Manual. So I was doing all the right things, I thought, doing exercise, training clients, but I was also training for Ironman, competed top age group athlete and did marathons and long distance cycling events and loved doing the endurance training. But was doing low carb and caught probably too low carb. And I was doing fasting over the years after that and got into too much fasting. So I always talk about the Goldilocks effect. Less is more. More is not better. Find the right amount for you. And men are different than women, that we need to personalize all this information. And brought me to nutritional therapy and why I wanted to do FDN practitioner so I could do functional lab testing. So I got to have what we call an FDN. The old me, I was doing a little bit of everything. So we call this metabolic chaos. I had internal breakdown and burnout of my body systems. More is not better is what I always say for a reason, because too much of anything can be toxic, too little can lead to deficiencies. What's that right amount to create that positive response? So chronic is not a good thing of anything, right? Chronic stress, chronic inflammation, chronic whatever, fill in the blank. It's usually not positive. And so I started to have my own adrenal exhaustion. If it's, mitochondria, it's a cell danger theory. There's so many different theories. So who knows really what it was? It was just, I didn't feel good. So I do what I do now to help precision medicine, help give personalized programs. So now I'm focusing on how do we improve the aging process? How do we thrive as we get older and not struggle to survive every day? How do we improve movement? And we talked about VO2 max in the beginning. That's a big hot thing people are talking about. Peter Attia has kind of started this, and now all of his fellow podcast buddies is Dr. Rhonda Patrick and Huberman. VO2 max is a buzzword. Zone 2 training and sprint training are now VO2 max training. But really, we want to look at muscle mass. Are you lean? What is your muscle mass to fat mass ratio? Get your body composition tested, because it's not just about doing more cardio. Zone 2, as I said, doesn't need to be necessarily for most of us 80% of our workouts. It's different for women. And if you're like me, who's been endurance sport forever doing zone 2 maffetone training, and I did metabolic testing back in 2005. Before that was following the max aerobic function heart rate since I started Ironman's 2001, started heart rate training back then. So I've been doing this for a long time. I'm 52 years old. I don't need long sustained distance zone 2 training. I need the opposite. I'm losing power. I have less speed. I have more mobility issues and tight my hips. So my focus is going to be around here. I want to increase my lean body mass, lose fat. So what happens as you age is going to be different for everybody, different men versus women. And as our hormones change women, we have a little bit more need for strength. So for females and men, focus on what you need, not what someone's telling you, but get more intuitive. Listen to your body, get testing. You kind of know when you feel kind of flabby, and maybe you know that you're doing too much HIIT training, or you're doing just all your workouts in zone 2, or you're not even doing zone 2. You're probably in zone 3 thinking you're doing zone 2. So we really need to stop guessing what we're doing and get a little bit more accuracy if you're struggling getting results. So what do you need is going to vary per person. So what are common mistakes that we make? Let's go into some things. Again, I just said, maybe you're doing too much sprint training, too much zone 4, too much zone 3. We want a little bit of each. How much do you need in each heart zone? How much strength training do you need? How much sprint interval training you need is going to be different for everyone. So what can metabolic testing help us learn and personalize? Well, metabolic testing in our resting metabolism test we'll talk about, and the exercise test. So we're going to get some information on your how many calories you burn at rest. What is your zone 2 is your peak fat max. What's your fat max you're burning? And what's your metabolic crossover point where the carbs start to increase and the fat goes down? How many calories you're burning? What is your VO2 peak? Most people don't do max. They can't stay there that long. They're not comfortable in that top end zone. So we want to estimate your VO2 max, or just find your peak, but really find where's your fat max training, where's your sprint interval training, or your zone 4, so we can work on improving those numbers. Movement economy, heart fitness, lung fitness, cellular fitness. We look at all these markers. So we do PNOE. I do PNOE breath analysis, measuring your breath as well as metabolism. So what is a breath analysis? It's measuring or analyzing your heart, lungs, cells, blood circulation, metabolism, how they work all together. If one is off, like a wheel in your bike, your spoke's broken, the whole wheel is going to be off, right? So an orchestra. If one player is off, the whole orchestra is going to be a little bit off balance. So we want to find where is your limiting factor, and a breath analysis test, metabolic testing, VO2 max, whatever you want to call it, cardiopulmonary exercise testing, metabolic analysis. There's multiple names for it, but we're all measuring the same thing: the lungs, heart, and cells. So you're measuring with the oxygen or face mask, measuring oxygen in, so oxygen absorption, transfer utilization, and your carbon dioxide out. So with the mask we put on you and connect it to our device, we're going to get some data. But what I find, even this blood test I did and the liver test I just did with someone in Solana Beach, it's great information. But if I do this test and not go a little bit deeper dive with you to figure out what are you doing now, what's your daily nutrition, exercise, supplement, eating habits, stress, sleep, all that together, what I call the holistic method, and then figure out what to do with this data we collect, that's going to mean something. But if I just give you this test and report back, it's probably just another piece of paper, another number sitting on your pile. So we want to ideally work with someone that's going to listen to, what have we been doing? What do I want to do? What do I like to do? And what do I see, or how do I see myself living life 5, 10, 20, 30 years from now? And let's start visualizing what I want to be doing, and let's figure out how to get there. So the metabolic testing that I use through PNOE, it's a Greek company. The name PNOE is the ancient Greek word for breath. It's a high-level cardiovascular respiratory metabolic analysis by a 2-part breath test. The VO2 max, or VO2 peak, is a measure that can help you understand your cardiovascular fitness and how well the body uses oxygen. So doing a metabolism or metabolic analysis, a test, isn't just looking at your calories you're burning. We're looking at analyzing how well you use that oxygen, how well you deliver it, and your carbon dioxide, how that's you're breathing out, what's going on, right? So the vital functions your body runs and how it uses the oxygen to keep you alive. So we use that in the test. So the 2 reports that I do are the resting metabolic rate first. It's fasted, 10-minute test. We're going to get all this information from you first when I do my coaching programs. The exercise test will get this report with all this data here listed on a slide if you're watching the video. So resting metabolic test and the active metabolism test or exercise. Okay, so I lost my little clicker. Now, personalization is what I think is really important as we do precision medicine. And the Wild Health program I'm in, it's kind of what I use with PNOE, what I do with functional lab testing, with nutritional therapy. We're not guessing what you should do to be your best version of yourself. We're going to get this data, and then we're going to figure out, okay, what works best for you. Let's look at your blood chemistry analysis. Let's look at your metabolic health markers. Let's ideally wear a CGM for a month or so and figuring out how different foods impact your glucose as well as stressors. And a microbiome test is great too, and a food sensitivity test would be ideal. Putting this all together, at least with the metabolic testing here, we can figure out your zone 2. Where do you need to improve your mitochondria capacity, your fat burning efficiency, cellular fitness, where you need to work on your metabolic health? Where do we need to train 4 or 5 to increase your VO2 max, improve testosterone, and often need that, lung function, your respiratory health, the balance between resistance and cardio? A lot of people, endurance athletes in my world, do too much cardio. They don't understand to improve your metabolism as you age isn't doing more cardio. It is spending more time lifting heavy weights. So if you're struggling with your weight gain as we age, don't blame the aging process. Embrace it and change how you train. Really important. Eating that protein and lifting heavy weights, because we have this battle as we get older with our body composition changing, especially as females with our hormones changing. So less cardio, maybe more sprints for us females, especially who have done endurance training for a long time. Get off the cardio machines and get in the gym. All right, let's dive into the resting metabolism report. So we do the breathing analysis. We look at some measurements when you're lying down, not on treadmill, you're just resting. And we're finding this RER, respiratory exchange ratio. We're looking at how much fat to carbohydrate you burn at rest. So we can see during the exercise test as well, we're measuring this exchange ratio of breath, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. 0.7 marker is going to be, well, this chart actually I'm looking at here on the screen is your breathing frequencies and measuring how much the breaths per minute. And also normal breathing through mouth and nose, RER mean is 0.8. And so this example, the person mouth breathing and mouth and nose, you can see the differences slightly change, but 1.0 RER, respiratory exchange ratio, or RQ value is carbohydrates, 100%. When we look at RER of 0.7, we're looking at more fat, 100% fat. So we're finding those numbers. Okay, when we do the exercise test, we're looking at your VO2 max, right? We hear this all the time. American Heart Association declared VO2 max, maximal oxygen consumption for overall health 2016, which is many years ago now. But that is something where you look at VO2 max. I think it's more the peak I like to tell my clients. And then from there, we can figure out some other markers. So optimal or your peak VO2, we can find your biological age. So we get a report if we have the VO2 max. We can estimate your chronological versus biological age. So VO2 max makes your biological age higher, better your VO2 max is. You're better fat burn efficiency, you're better at burning fat, you're better at higher calorie burn, you're going to improve your biological age. Now, that chart, VO2 max at the bottom, kind of shows you too, based on your age, height, weight, gender. We'll get a little estimate. Now, these markers, it says here, VO2 max, fat burn efficiency lowers your biological age. Metabolic rate increases it, but we'll go over that. Fat burn efficiency, metabolic rate. Whoop, and we'll go back to that. I want to look into that. Should be better metabolism, better fat burn efficiency should improve your lifespan. So here's example. We want to be optimal, not normal. Your blood chemistry panel, your doctor does. It's normal. It's based on sick people, right? Not functional optimal levels we want to look at. So good result on our reports. We're going to see your VO2 peak, VO2 pulse with your heart rate. How's that looking? And a steady heart rate trend. No peaks and valleys for every beat going up increases your VO2 pulse. So oxygen to heart rate. So that's going to give us a report score on your cardiovascular health. The lower score on aerobic health based on your VO2 peak, you'll score lower. So that's just example on these reports. So cardiovascular fitness is on here and the aerobic health. So these are sample reports. And then the aerobic health score on here will help us measure your VO2 peak. So that how is this measured? It says on the report, calculated by a VO2 peak, the maximum amount of oxygen your body can absorb. So the higher your VO2 peak is, the higher score on the aerobic health. Since oxygen absorption requires effective operation to all critical organs as your lungs, heart, cells, and blood, aerobic health marker is the most holistic picture of every system working together to help you live a long quality life, and athletic performance will improve here too as well. So, all right, we'll look at all these other markers too. We'll dive into cardiovascular fitness score, high intensity recovery. So these two markers are done looking at your performance at the top end, measuring how well the lungs supply oxygen and how well the heart pumps into the body across all exercise intensities during a VO2 max test. This is reflected by your O2 pulse, which we just talked about as a metric reflecting oxygen pumped at every heartbeat, and your VO2 to BF, the oxygen absorbed per breath cycle, so breathing frequency. That's your your high intensity performance marker, how that is measured. And then it finds suggestions that might be good for you. This is where I personalize it because I don't say everyone needs to do everything on this page. And but this person in this sample scored excellent. So they're already doing high intensity. So we're not going to say, hey, you need to spend more time doing that because you're already good. Maybe we need to spend more time in the areas they're not working on. But actually here, I see this client has recovery capacity low. So they're doing well at high, but the recovery is low. So that means to me, they're not coming down in between those intervals to zone 1. So recovery capacity is measured by assessing the rate of which the heart rate and volume of carbon dioxide exhaled, VCO2, drops during the recovery phase of the test. So when we do the test, I do a warm-up test to figure out what your RP is at different heart rates, and we calculate what the test protocol is going to be for you. So how much we increase intensity, speed each minute. Then when we stop the test, when you get to be RPE out of a 10 and you say, I'm done, we see what we need to see. Most people stop before then. And then we stand still 2.5 minutes to measure how fast does your heart rate come down, and then how fast you see that change in oxygen to carbon dioxide. So the faster the heart rate and the VCO2 drop during the first 2 minutes of the recovery phase, the higher you score in this category. All right, so another measurement we look at, which kind of is a different one, depends on what your goal is called movement economy. So how efficiently your body moves. If you are focusing on running, bike riding, your biomechanics and muscle activation patterns make a difference. So improving movement economy reduces energy consumption, minimizes fatigue accumulation during training and competition, more efficiency, enhanced performance, able to sustain higher intensities for longer durations. So that's one of the markers on the report. We want to look at what fuel source you're burning, what heart zone. So each person switches fuel sources at different heart rates. So we want to, again, test and not guess what those zones are, not just look at lactate threshold testing as people are hot on. It's easy blood test to do, and you can do this along with a test as PNOE and compare the two, but it's not measuring. A lactate test isn't measuring where you're burning peak fat and where your metabolic crossover point is and your breathing frequencies at different intensities. So we look at your zones. They're specific to that sport. So running is going to be possibly different than your bike. Cycling zones, as I said, I just said that different than running. And the zones change with the right training protocol. So after we test you and I give you your results, we talk about exercise program. People ideally have a coach or work with me for ongoing. I do 6-month contracts, so we keep retesting and reassess and change their goals based on the test results and what they have been doing, what they have not been doing, and they want to get done. So this just explains what the high intensity performance score is. We went over how well your heart and lungs work at high exercise. So the movement economy metabolic rate we went over. Metabolic rate, by the way, is calculated by assessing your mechanical efficiency during the warm-up. So that's your beginning part of the test that we're warming up, 3 minutes. Mechanical efficiency shows how much energy from nutrients, the calories your body consumes in order to move. The greater number of calories burned to move at a certain rate, the higher your metabolism is. So that's what's measured in the beginning of the test. So it's how fast or slow your metabolism is, and this is what we'll look at too with the resting metabolic rate and correlate it together. How do you improve your metabolism? Note here, endurance training has little to no effect on enhancing metabolic rate. Right? So endurance training can even reduce metabolic rate due to its effect on increasing movement economy. So I'd say more stress. So an interval training, zone 4 and 5, can impact your metabolism by promoting muscle development and enhancing development through increase of growth hormone and testosterone levels. If you're starting out, more so. Then a resistance training, of course, should be the metabolic rate, strength and hypertrophy, however you want to say it, training modulates increase your metabolic rate. This is because you promote muscle mass development, lean body mass improves. You reduce your movement economy, making your body burn more calories while moving. Okay, so nutrition, we want to look at protein. High fiber foods, I don't really go into that with people, or the coffee, that's going to be different. Mitochondria. So what do we learn about the mitochondria? I just want to add this slide in. Mitochondria function. You hear about mitochondria are where you create energy. mitochondria function, and we want to look at mitochondria density and mitochondria capacity. So the concentration or abundance of mitochondria within a cell or tissue are the density. Mitochondria are the organelles in eukaryotic cells responsible for generating energy in the form of ATP through the process of cellular respiration. Cells with high energy demands, as muscle cells that we're testing here, tend to have higher mitochondrial density to meet their metabolic needs. And then we talk about mitochondria capacity. This is the maximal amount or efficiency of mitochondria generating ATP to create oxidative phosphorylation. So this is going to be that zone 2 training. The capacity of very depending factors. This capacity can vary depending on factors such as number of mitochondria present, health and efficiency, availability of oxygen, and the nutrients in the cell's environment. So the higher mitochondria capacity typically correlates with the greater metabolic flexibility and your body's ability of your cells to respond to the increased energy demands. And that's what we can see when we're testing, kind of play around testing. I like to do a follow-up test and hold it each heart rate a little longer, maybe see how they switch back to burning fat when we go into carbohydrate, and then do a little special test. Anyway, so we look at metabolic rate score, burning efficiency. So this is actually, you might want to know this is kind of part of that zone 2 training where I say lactate threshold testing doesn't tell us this. So zone 2 is where we talk about fat burning efficiency, but it's calculated by assessing your crossover point, the exercise intensity where your body transitions from burning primarily fats to burning mainly carbohydrates. Higher the exercise intensity this transition occurs, the higher fat burning efficiency score is. So remember, we talked about that zone 2. The bottom of zone 2 is your peak fat burning, and the top of your zone 2 is where I identify this switch to burning more carbohydrates and fat. And that's going to impact your fat burning efficiency score. How do you improve that? Talking about how you train, but also meal timing, cold exposure improves mitochondrial health, increases fat burning efficiency, reducing stress, as chronic stress, as you know, my story, life is not a race, it is a journey, that stress hormones, cortisol, can get chronically elevated and help you get instant resistance in time because your blood sugar is up all the time, and also can help you store fat. So we want to manage our stress and boost our metabolism, fat burning efficiency with what we're eating. It's good essential fatty acid, omega-3 fatty acids, having more fish in our diet, and getting more movement throughout the day, and all sorts of other things you can work on. So fat burning efficiency score, we talk about that. And then we've got breathing scores, breathing cognition, breathing stability. Then we figure out, what are you doing? What does the test teach us? What are your goals? Let's figure out training program. How much resistance training per week should you do? Let's look at how much time you have. What are you motivated to do? What does your ideal work week and weekend look like for you for self-care, healthcare, fitness program, resistance training? And then when you're out of town, what can you do? When you're in town, do you have a goal you're working towards? So we kind of go into this, maybe looking at month to month, as I do with Training Peaks with people's workouts, but figuring out, okay, here's what my workout is. Now, how much cardio versus resistance versus interval training, we'll get that from all this data we collect and look at the whole picture. And then we get definitions of workout description and what you want to know, your training zones. So let's stop here for a moment. So we've got interval training. We've got cardio-based training, that zone 2, and tempo training is more zone 3. Interval training is going to be, well, 3, 4, and 5, but zone 1 in between. So what are intervals? Short intervals, medium, and long. So let's start with long over here. They're long bouts of medium intensity where the goal is to get and stay in zone 4, so the bottom of zone 4 for 10 minutes, then recover in zone 1 for about 5 minutes. Your work and recovery time begin when you enter zone 4 and 1. So once your heart rate drops, say back down, and this example is 131 to 141 is their zone 1. That's when they start their timer for zone 1 in 5 minutes. When they start their timer, when they're doing a 10-minute piece in the bottom, I'd say the top is zone 3. I wouldn't be 10 minutes here. I'd say zone 3 would be my long intervals tempo. That's where we're staying. So maybe 166. This is a crazy person's example here. So medium sprint or medium intervals, not sprints, short bouts of intense physical activity where your goal is every set to get and stay in the lower end of zone 5 for 1 to 4 minutes. So it's kind of the VO2 max workouts. To me, that's on top of zone 4, maybe bottom of zone 5. 1 to 4 minutes. And then you recover the same time duration in zone 1. So your time, say this person's 180, 1 minute to 4 minutes, back to 130 heart rate, 131 for the same amount of time, 4 minutes. So 1-to-1 ratio, work to recovery. Now, if we find that you need more sprint interval training, especially for us aging female athletes, based on Dr. Stacy Sims' research she shares, your goal is to get every set to get to the highest end of your zone 5. This is where the heart rate monitor doesn't really work because it doesn't go fast enough on your watch to get that number. So you go all out, highest end of your zone 5, 30 seconds, 10 to 30 seconds. And then you come back down twice that, so say 60 seconds or more in zone 1. But this is where we see your recovery, how much your recovery is. If you are going up here to the zone 5, say 10, 30 seconds, I'm coming down here for a minute or more. That minute, I start my timer when I see 141 heart rate. There's my minute starts. Okay, minute's over, boom, dole out, hard as I can. That's sprint interval training. I'm dying to go 10 more seconds. You just go hard as you can. So the benefits in zone 5 improves VO2 max, enhances fat burning efficiency, cellular health, increases fatigue threshold, because you get, I think that's more so coming down to recovery is helping that fatigue threshold. Now zone 4 increases fatigue threshold because you're tolerating that metabolic waste products, flushing it out in that recovery. Increases anaerobic threshold, improves VO2 max. So it appears your VO2 max workouts. Zone 3, heart fitness. This is more us training for half marathon, a marathon. We're going to do some race pace work, 1 minute, 20 minutes. So this is long intervals, medium endurance. This is medium intervals. So this actually is saying the wrong words here. Medium intervals should be zone 4. Short intervals should be zone 5. Zone 2, that's your long, steady distance. Zone 2 base training. Once a week, go for a long hike or bike or run. Easy zone 2. Now, this is last page. You get energy consumption. Let's figure out calories, fat to carbohydrates. How many calories you're burning? Average, low end, high end, based on that heart rate, based on your metabolic assessment. And then if you were doing a breath test, we can get this oxygen score. So then we can look at a calculation comes out here based on your maximal aerobic speed and your speed at VT2 comes out with your estimated pace. Now, what is your VO2? You can see down here, the last page goes your thresholds. What is your fat max? Where were you burning the most fat? VT1. So let's fat max says exercise intensity where a person burns the most amount of fat and the least amount of carbohydrate. VT1 is exercise intensity in which physical activity starts to be considered a workout. I would like to get a different definition because I think that's kind of silly. VT1 is where you start to get a little harder, so maybe getting into that zone 3. Your carbohydrate usage comes up. VO2 peak, the maximum oxygen consumption in milliliters per kilogram per minute of body weight achieved during the test. Peak. That's your peak. It doesn't mean it's your max. A lot of people don't push themselves, so we say peak. Now, what is your VT2? We used to call it anaerobic threshold. The exercise intensity in which the body transitions into zone 5 where anaerobic metabolism, creatine phosphate system is used up there, comes the body's energy. So, oops, where are we? I messed up. So we look at genetic markers another time, but fuel usage. Remember, zone 2, we're teaching the body to burn fat. We've got all this fat stored. Even if you're pretty lean, you got a lot of fat to use. Limited amount of calories stored in your muscle glycogen, liver. So we are finding that out. Oops, it's not working again. Hold on. Where's my little do that? So we're going next, fuel usage. We understand what fuel you're using. We're just going over that. RER in one share. This is kind of what we're looking at, 0.7 to 1. The fat to carbohydrate burn, 0.85, 50 fat, 50 carbohydrate. So you can get kind of a data on there. We look at fuel sources during exercise. We can see that the carbohydrate and the fat. So fatty acids, triglycerides, break down fatty acids. Oxidative phosphorylation of carbohydrates. When we get zone 3, I should switch those around because it's backwards. But zone 1 and 2, you're going to be fat. Zone 3, you're a little bit more carbs, still some fats. Lactate, I've been reading, is a little bit everywhere. And then we get a little higher glycogen, glycolysis, and creatine phosphate up in zone 5. So kind of go and talk, what is that oxidative phosphorylation? What is your peak fat max? So we look at your aerobic, anaerobic we used to talk about, but now it's more, there isn't with oxygen or without oxygen, they can all blend together. You can see a chart I just shared on my Instagram the other day that just shows all the fuel sources kind of overlap. It's not just a wall and it's just fat, carbohydrate in your breath. Metabolism is going to be kind of crossing over, increasing, decreasing. All right, a little bit more fat oxidation rates and then aerobic glycolysis. You can read about all what that means if you want to know more. This metabolic crossover point, carbohydrate, fat, higher intensity fuel source lactate versus creatine phosphate. I was diving into this because it's not lactic acid that creates the burn I talked about in a previous video. It's the byproducts. So it's more, we get more the breakdown of lactate gets used through pyruvate, gets recycled and back into fuel source, right? So we can use that, but to get that burn, it's from more acidic blood. So we can go into the fuel source. We can talk about that next time. Females went to do testing. Dr. Stacy Sims told me, obviously, you're going to be here, maybe right after ovulation. So we want to track for females that are cycling where to test. Interesting. And look at metabolism. How can you improve your metabolism? Metabolic flexibility. We talked about the RER exchange. What does that even mean? We can go into, and then I'm doing a separate podcast on oxidative stress because this is a big part of what's happening. We're improving oxidative stress, but too much of anything is not good for us. So oxidative stress increases with exercise intensity. So the harder workouts you're doing, you're having more higher oxygen consumption, increased production of ROS, reactive oxygen species, and free radicals. What are those? They're natural byproducts of cellular metabolism. They play a central role in signaling and cellular function, but too much of anything can lead to oxidative damage, cells, proteins, lipids, and DNA. So regular exercise stimulates the body's antioxidant defense mechanisms, why we don't want to take antioxidants post-workout. Let the body stimulate its own antioxidants, but really let ourselves mitigate oxidative stress, but we often need to supplement later when you're doing a lot of exercise. That's why less is more for a lot of us. So we look at longevity, VO2 max. What does that mean? And then I talked about the VT1, VT2, and all that information we can dive into. So lots of repetition, but I just want to go into mitochondria. Do we need fasting? Mitochondria, what it helps, what it doesn't, and finding your zones. So this is why I think you should look into metabolic testing. Figure out what your zones are. What is that zone 2, 3, 4, 5, and your zone 1 for intervals? So if you have questions, let me know. I'm doing testing and not guessing for my clients in Solana Beach, Del Mar, North San Diego. But if there's a group of you, I can come out to you. So let's stay in touch. Head to debbiepotts.net to learn more. Talk soon.